Woman called me a cist little btch because I didn't let her cut the line for a drink. Hello. My previous job had me working as a food service worker in a bakery. I worked at a certain berry-themed amusement park, and I worked there for about 2 years before quitting a few months back for a job that pays me better. I liked the job for the most part. Most people were cool, and I really only encountered difficult people during busy seasons, and my coworkers, with the exception of 2 who hated me, had my during these encounters. We were also right next to the park security office. The way my location was set up was a little bit weird and specific. It was a bakery with 3 massive display cases separating us as the employees from the customers, 2 registers between the display cases and our soda machine, and a little nook off to the side. In this nook, there were 3 machines, a massive coffee pot, a hot chocolate machine that was just a little broken and always messy despite my best efforts to keep it clean, and a run-down little latte machine. There's a counter right next to this machine where the coffees and stuff would be called out. There was also 2 registers set up outside at this time because it was busy season, and this was the most efficient way for us as employees to serve customers. There was almost always 1 or 2 people on the register outside, and this time it was my team lead, basically a mini manager, who really liked me because I trained him. This happened on my last day there. This park has a drink program where anybody with the annual pass could pay an extra $10 or so and redeem a free fountain drink every 15 minutes. People who weren't pass holders also could get the drink program by buying a souvenir bottle for like $30 that they could use throughout the day and reactivate if they came on a different day. A lot of people with this drink program tended to feel like they didn't need to wait in lines for their drink redemption, and it was common for them to walk up to the other side of the counter and ask for their refill, and usually, they were annoyed but never malicious when I or one of my coworkers told them that they unfortunately had to wait in line for drinks, as many people in line were also just getting drinks. Not this lady though, oh no. This lady was out for blood, and she must have sensed that I was in a good mood. It was the last hour and a half of my final shift. I was busy cleaning up a couple of messes that had been made throughout the day by the hot chocolate and latte machines, and was simultaneously talking to my managers and other leads about my plans for the future, about where I pick up my last check, etc., etc. Suddenly, I heard somebody unscrewing the lids off their cups and pushing them towards me. This woman was a little taller than me. I'm 5 feet 3 inches, had sunglasses and a baseball cap on, and didn't look very pleasant. You develop a sixth sense for difficult people when working for theme parks, you see. She had 2 souvenir bottles on the counter and was holding them out to me. I smiled at her and told her, "Oh, I'm sorry. You actually have to wait in line to get refills. I know it's inconvenient, but it's park policy." She scoffed at me and said, "I'm just getting drinks," and I reiterated that she still had to wait in line, adding that even though the line was really long right now, there were other people in it who were also just getting drinks. So she disappears and I assume that she'd gone to wait in the, admittedly pretty long, line. In that time, I finished cleaning the machines and returned to helping customers in line with my other coworkers. About 5 minutes pass and this lady comes storming back in, cutting the line again and walking up to the register. She pointed at me and said, "You." It's important to note here that I am mixed race, but look white and am usually perceived as white because TBH, I didn't go outside much at this time and have only recently started getting my darker color back. This woman was black, and most of my coworkers are POC. I'm also autistic with low support needs. I'm just a little awkward and anxious, fidgety, and have trouble making eye contact despite my best efforts. So I'm sure that had something to do with why this lady locked onto me and not my other neurotypical coworkers. She kept yelling at me, saying, "You're a cis little dog, aren't you? You lied to me because I'm black. I wasted all that time in line, and your manager told me that you lied to me. You did this because I'm black, didn't you?" I, as any reasonable person would be, was startled. I had been trained for conflicts like this because I was supposed to be a team lead before management changed, and I was usually the person to deal with customers like her for that exact reason. This was partially why I quit. Regardless, this was my first time being cussed by a customer in a malicious way. I said, "I'm sorry about that, but I didn't lie to you. I can get you your drinks, though." So, she basically threw her cups at me and said, I want Coke and Diet Coke. I gave her those and handed her back the cups one by one, telling her which was which. She promptly scoffed and said, "You didn't put them in the right cups. Are you stupid?" And she pushed the cups back at me. I had enough at that point and asked one of my friends to take over for me as I went to go talk to my lead outside. I went out there and told him about the lady, and he informed me that he did not, in fact, tell her to cut the line. He said that he scanned her drink pass and told her to just wait for one of us behind the counter to help her, and we'd get to her as soon as possible. I told him about her insults to me, and just like that, boom, she appeared behind me. This woman had followed me outside and started berating me in front of my lead and hundreds of customers, one again calling me a cist little dog and saying that I hated black people, that I was a lazy piece of poop, that I didn't know how to do my job, and that I had no right to be standing there and doing FCK all when the line was out the door. My lead stood up for me, and I'd finally just fold her. "It's my last day. You can't talk to me that way," and walked away. She didn't follow me again, and even though I had kept my cool for the entirety of the interaction, it hit me all at once and I had a small meltdown in the bakery's storage room. My coworkers, now friends, were very understanding and let me take my time, and thankfully this woman did not ruin my day. I don't miss that job. Seriously, man, if you're going to go to a theme park, please be nice to the workers. I can tell you from experience that most parks are single-handedly run by teenagers, and unless it's a big park like the one I currently work at, management is in their early to mid-20s and corporate doesn't care about us. Be nice, please. Now to the next story, Story 2. Entitled Joe Almost Gets Thrown Off My Roof. It's been a long time since I posted anything about Entitled Todd or Entitled Joe. Joe's death really kind of hit me hard. First, a quick update on his mom. She is still living in the house by herself and my 3 boys. Yep, I have 3 now, and I help her out a great deal. With the loss of Joe, I've watched her frail little frame go from falling down several times a week to standing somewhat straighter and not falling down at all. She's outside more and seems just a little stronger than she did before. It makes me happy to see this. As I mentioned before, I know nothing about homeownership. So when my AC went out in August in Phoenix, he immediately came over and looked at it. Unfortunately, it was not an easy fix, and he told me to call an HVAC company to have them look at it. I called one I had used once before, and they came out right away. Joe, not wanting me to be taken advantage of, promptly climbed up their ladder to stand over them while they looked at the AIC and discussed the issues. One of them, we'll call him H as he's a main character in this story, asked if they could help him, and he just stared at them, didn't say a word. I was in my driveway talking to my best friend, who lives across the street, but also kind of tuned into what was going on my roof. I was nervous. Joe's stance was somewhat combative, and I couldn't figure out why. H asked again if they could help him, and he said, "I'm just here to make sure you don't screw her over." WTF? I didn't ask him to do that. H maintained professionalism and said, "Okay, but we can't have you climbing up here on our ladder. There's a huge liability issue for both us and for her if something happens." Joe said, "I've been a contractor for 30 years. That's BS. Professionalism slipped a little. Man, I'm telling you not to use our ladder again. You don't have permission to use our equipment." Joe huffs a little and stays on the roof. The HVAC guys come down their ladder, and Joe climbs down to a lower roof at the back of my house, then to an outdoor toy box and to the ground. He comes through my gate looking smug and proud and walks into his house. H tells me what's wrong with my AC, and I give permission to make the repairs right away. As the other one walks away to start gathering tools, H stays behind and addresses the situation with Joe. I apologize and tell them that Joe helps me out with a lot of handyman stuff, and I wasn't expecting him to do that. H asked me to ask him to stay away because he felt uncomfortable with his presence and attitude. About 10 minutes later, they climb back up on my roof to start repairs. What does Joe do? That maniac comes out of his storage shed with his own ladder and climbs back up on my roof to stand over them. I call to him, but he either didn't hear me, not likely, or was ignoring me. That sounds about right. I immediately start hearing arguing, and it escalates quick. Suddenly, H has moved from crouching and is standing nose to nose with Joe on my roof, yelling at Joe. Joe is yelling back, and both men are close to physical contact. Joe threatens to throw H off my roof, and at this point H's partner stands up and says, "Try it. We'll see who goes flying." Joe climbs down his ladder, and in the process of removing it, he accidentally knocks theirs over. I rush to upright it, but damn if H didn't literally jump down from my one-story roof into my paved driveway and go nose to nose with Joe again. I am still speechless and completely unsure what to do. My friend whispers that she's about to call the police because this isn't going to go well. Joe finally walks away, and H heads to the work truck. He comes back with a huge tool and heads towards his ladder. Joe comes sauntering back to my driveway with a baseball bat. H is stunned. He just stands there for a moment with his mouth open. Joe says, "What are you going to do with that, tough guy?" gesturing towards the tool. H says, "Fix her damn AC. What are you doing with that damn bat?" Joe smiles and takes a few steps forward. It is important to understand that at this moment, I am no longer in control of my body. Imagine my surprise to find my body moving in between these two weaponized men and facing Joe. "Joe, I really appreciate you looking out for me, but I think it would be best you leave and let them fix my AC. It's too hot for this SHD." Joe tries to argue, and I honestly don't remember what he said. I just stared at him. He left. I turned to H and said, "I am so sorry. I'll make sure he leaves you alone." H apologizes to me profusely, says he's been acting unprofessionally and should have controlled his temper. I told him it was fine, that I had known Joe a long time and knew how he was. I had just never seen him escalate like this before. Joe stays away, and H and his partner get my AC up and running. They knock $100 off my bill to apologize for the shenanigans. H called me about an hour after they left to apologize again. I continued to use their services until H called me a couple years later to tell me that he was moving to the East Coast with his family and closing his business. He recommended another company who I still use to this day. Joe has never again approached any professional team at my house. We never talked about it either, and he continued to do small repairs for me when I asked. Next story, Story 3. Entitled "Millennial Acting Like a Boomer," just happened last night. I work overnights for a good-sized tow company in a popular Northwest city. I was in the truck for over 10 years. Now I'm in the office. I dispatch drivers, process paperwork, and help customers at the front counter when they come in to get their vehicles. I should mention that we are the primary contractor for our city's police department, which means we respond when they want a vehicle towed for a parking infraction, DUI, accident, stolen vehicle, etc. We also have contracts with private properties to remove improperly parked vehicles, but the police work is by far the largest percentage of our business. Being overnights, I see more than my fair share of DUI calls and accident calls, while I have less parking infraction calls on my shift. Being on graveyard, I also get more than my fair share of wackadoos. Now, for the most part, people who come in are decent. They're not happy to have to pay money to get their car, but they usually understand that the police ordered the vehicle towed, so their ire is best aimed at the cops. Some actually admit that they made a mistake and chalk it up to a learning experience. Those are fancy multicolored unicorns with sprinkles. It's kind of a crapshoot, and I have thick skin, so meh. On this particular evening, the shift previous to mine was busy, so I helped the clerk get caught up on his paperwork. There were a lot of parking infractions from some event downtown, so I knew the beginning of my shift would see some of these folks coming in to get their cars. And sure enough, I did. And they were mostly civil. But this one woman, she's no more than 30 and is giving off strong Karen vibes. She explains that her car was towed because she ran out of gas and left it in the middle of the street. No note or anything, mind you. No phone hashtag to call. The police deemed it a hazard to traffic and ordered it towed. Happens all the time. She mentions wanting a form to request a hearing with the municipal court to contest the impound. No problem, we can do that. 2 different ways, actually. Option 1. Pay the bill, get an itemized receipt and a hearing form, and take the vehicle. Send the hearing form in and at the hearing, explain to the judge the circumstances. If they decide it shouldn't have been towed, or they want to cut the owner a break, they'll get some or all of their money back. Option 2. Request an expedited hearing. I fill out a form and fax it to the court. They don't get to take the vehicle, but they can get property out of it if needed. 2 business days later, a hearing is held and they can explain the circumstances to the judge. If the judge finds in their favor, the court clerk will give the owner a form that directs us to release the vehicle to the owner at no charge. Once they come back to me and give me the form, I release the car and the transaction is done. Here's the thing. She wanted the hearing form, but wanted to take the vehicle without payment. No, not the way it works. She immediately goes from 0 to pig in 2.8 seconds, demanding a manager, at midnight on Saturday night, threatening to call the police, please do, swearing that her lawyer was going to get us shut down, what? And stating that her car had been impounded before and that was how it was done then. When I was able to get a word in edgewise, I explained it again. Then she wanted a copy of the company policy. Like, WTF? Does the grocery store need a company police to say you can't take those bananas without paying? Spoiler, it does not. When she realized that I wasn't going to budge, she then told me that I was a bad man, that I was not a godly man. I agreed and said, nope, I'm a Satanist. She looked at me like I'd slapped her and went outside. I presume she tried calling the police and was laughed at. I had other people to help, so I didn't see her for a while. But when she came back in, I didn't think she could be in a worse mood, but holy crap, she managed it. I then had to explain the hearing form procedures over and over ad infinitum with her boyfriend. She kept saying that it didn't make sense and was demanding to know exactly how she would get reimbursed. I told her, I've never attended one of these hearings, so I don't know how they do things there, and no one ever comes back to tell me. Then I made the mistake of suggesting that she might not be reimbursed, and oh Jesus, that set her off again. The dude finally got tired of her shit and handed me a debit card, just to end the pain. All told, this was a nearly 4-hour ordeal. The rest of the night was comparatively smooth. Only had one crackhead come in to try to sell me a speaker for $10. So just one more night until the weekend.